Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Jeff.
Jeff.
Hello, all, and apologies for the delayed arrival.
Jeff, you showed up perfect timing. We're starting at 3:35, so you've still got 15, 16 seconds.
Oh, okay. What am I going to do for the? Well, I think maybe that's just a way to plunge in. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Empowerment Committee meeting number 3. Jeff Williams, Director of City Planning and Development. And I think most of us know each other on the call, but along the way, if you have an opportunity to, if you're making comments, kind of introduce yourself, provide a little bit of background. We've got city staff here that you've met before. We have a guest in Travis Pendleton, who some folks may know. She was a planner here with the city. She's now with Vireo, and she's doing some work officially with us as a department and unofficially, really with the APA around lots of conversations related to equity, which is going to be the focus of the time that we spend today. And again, hopefully you'll notice through the patterns of these meetings, each time it's going to be less and less directly hearing from staff and more hearing from all of you, reacting to information that we've received, reacting to information you provided for us, and hope most importantly, us being able, hearing how we did at listening to incorporating your comments into the work product being put together. With that, again, thank everybody for being here. I'm going to turn things over. There's maybe starting the PowerPoint and the slideshow just for the basics. And I think the basics is about housekeeping things, just again, keeping yourself muted if you're not speaking, use the raise hand tool. We always stop periodically for questions. If folks need the refresher as well, whoever sharing the screen, the next thing you would see would be just some of the guides as it relates to using Teams, where you can find participants and how you can see the conversation. If you have any questions about technology along the way as well, just use the raise hand tool or just physically raise your hand. We're keeping an eye out. There's many of us on the call, and we'll work to help you with the technology either verbally or through the chat, unless the chat's your technical issue. With that, I think, Gerald, is it time for me to pivot over to you or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
That sounds great, Jeff. Thank you. And I apologize, everyone. My camera is not functioning, which is a shame because I really dressed nice today. So you'll only get my voice today.
And Gerald, we'll help you out. We all returned back to the office starting yesterday. So I saw Gerald in person and you looked very nice in person.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. So thank you and welcome everyone to Empowerment Committee number 3. As Jeff mentioned, today's meeting is going to be mostly about an equity conversation. We are going to go over the vision and goals from last time. We sent out a revised draft to you all to react to. We'll present that to you and get some reaction from you all today. But we'd like to hopefully spend the bulk of our time defining what equity means for a comprehensive plan, and then beginning to dive into our 4 strategy session topic areas and talking a little more specifically about what equity means for each of those, so that as we get into those strategy session meetings this summer, we could have that information to convey to participants and kind of guide that conversation as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping that Jeff kind of already went over, but try to please mute if you're not speaking, and then either use the raise your hand feature, as Jeff said, literally raise your hand and we will get to you. Please drop questions or comments in the chat as well. We'll be monitoring that as we go through. I think everyone is probably familiar after a year and a half of pandemic with Microsoft Teams functionality, but so I won't go through this in too much detail. We'll probably stop showing this slide after this meeting. But I just wanted to include it because it's possible that there may be one or two of you who are first-time attendees to this meeting. But just again, the Empowerment Committee is essentially the steering committee for our new comprehensive plan update. Your job really is to guide the overall direction of the plan, to making sure that we're incorporating those important values to you and your community and the city as a whole. We're asking people to maintain that big picture viewpoint as well, that citywide viewpoint as opposed to individual interests or property interests or things like that. Again, we view this, and that probably at the next meeting we'll talk a little bit about this specifically, but your job also is to help us identify sort of an implementation pathway, maybe to help connect us with potential partners, funding sources to get some of these things done as well. And so we're gonna probably at our next meeting, which probably is in August, we haven't made a determination on that yet, spend some time just talking about how we make this plan implementable and what are some things we can do during the planning process to help ensure that this plan is as implementable as possible. So the Empowerment Committee kind of sits, at the center of this process. We do have, as I mentioned, 4 strategy conversations that are going on around these 4 topic areas, and we'll talk more about each of these later on in the presentation. And we gave a presentation about what these are at the last meeting as well. But as we have these strategy sessions where we're talking about these specific topics, these groups are going to be reporting back to the Empowerment Committee frequently with more specific strategies related to the topics that they're assigned to. And then your job will be to look at these and as we're going to talk about today, to ensure that equity considerations are being incorporated, to make sure that we're being consistent with the vision and the goals that we've established, and then we'll go over in just a few moments. So our strategy sessions are underway. We had our very first visibility team meeting in May. We're having our first mobility team meeting on June 24th, and we're having our second visibility meeting on June 29th, I believe is the date. And I've got a slide with those dates and times on it after this as well. So again, each one of these strategy groups has a 4-meeting cycle. So we started with visibility and mobility last month and this month, and that'll go on for the next 4 months or so. And then when those are done, we'll begin serviceability and livability, and those will go on for about a 4-meeting cycle, if you will. So these are our upcoming strategy sessions. June 29th at 3 o'clock, again, is visibility's second meeting. They're going to talk about public realm and urban design at that meeting. Mobility is having its first meeting on June 24th at 3 p.m. and we'll send everybody virtual meeting invitations for both of these as well, if you haven't received those already. And mobility will this introductory meeting for mobility will kind of cover all the topics broadly at sort of a higher level, and then at the second, third, and fourth meetings, they'll kind of dive into the weeds a bit more. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the strategy sessions so far? Okay. So again, at our last meeting, we talked about how comprehensive plan is used, and really we talked about how they can be more implementable as well. And that's kind of leading into that conversation that hopefully we'll be ready to have at the next meeting, so that as we're developing the comprehensive plan, we could try to ensure that we've got an implementation process that we're developing, the same time that we're developing the plan. We also presented to you all a draft vision and goal and value statements and got some good feedback from you all. We've made some revisions, and we're here today to go over those revisions with you as well. So today, again, we're going to go over the what we hope is a final draft of the vision and goals. I think that's going to be kind of something that we'll continue to tweak and refine throughout the process, but we'd like to get something set so that we can take it out to the public and get some reaction from them, and also use these vision and goal statements in our strategy session meetings that we're having this month, and we'll continue to have for the next 4 to 6 months. And then we're going to have a detailed discussion about equity and what it means for comprehensive planning. And Travis Pendleton is here today. Her and Jeff have done quite a bit of work and made a couple of presentations about equity as it relates to planning. And so we've asked Travis to come and help guide that conversation about how we define equity specifically for comprehensive plan. And then we'll, again, get into each of those strategy sessions as well and try to define it for each of those a little more specifically. So for this is our plan hierarchy. The blue areas at the top is where we have been up to this point, kind of the higher level umbrella statements, the vision, which talks about what we want to be, the goals talk about what we need to achieve to get to the vision, and then the values talk about what we believe in. And so we've got drafts of those. The yellow area is the more action-oriented portion of the planning process and of the plan document, and that's what we're going to start to get into through the strategy sessions. They're going to begin to dive into the weeds and begin to identify more specific objectives that achieve the goals that you all have helped us establish. So again, our vision and goals are really intended to be limited to the physical development of the city and the built environment. So that's really our focus in the comprehensive plan. We want all of these things to be kind of viewed through that lens. So some of these things will have stronger ties to the physical built environment than others. Some of them are a little more obviously tied to the physical environment. Some of them have a little looser connection, but that we'll kind of work through those nuances as we continue to refine these. So this is our vision statement, overall vision statement, and it hasn't changed much since last time. We had a couple of typos where we had our word repeated twice. We did do some minor tweaks. Adding the word vibrant, for instance, was something that we heard from the committee last time. Adding the word thriving as well. But essentially this statement is basically the same with some minor tweaks based on feedback from you all at the last meeting. Anybody have any additional comments or thoughts on this before we move to the more specific statements? Okay. So these other statements are just intended to add some detail to that broad vision statement. So they continue to describe that future state, what we want our city to be in the future. And so they help describe that future vision statement, that future city. So this is kind of a marked up version of all the edits and additions we've made since our last meeting based on your input. I just kind of wanted to show you things that had changed without. I know it's a little bit hard to read with all the strike throughs and things like that, but this is the final version. Some of the things we heard about were adding the word vibrant to. People liked the connectedness idea. People liked the physical beauty idea. People wanted us to talk about being equitable in our service delivery. And so I think we have incorporated those ideas for the most part. And I know we sent this out in advance, and I hope you all had a time to look at it. I know this is a lot to take in all at once, but does anybody, we did get, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
This maybe would add a bit more about how we looked at these vision statements. And I think the slide before was really telling about the different colored text, because it was helpful to know where we started as a group, and then contributions that that you all provided for us. And I was really our goal and the idea to help clarify some of these plan visions. But I think it was the way to begin this pivot, and it's a slow arc or a turn. You know, what do we want to be? What do we aspire and what do we believe in? Well, now what are we going to need to achieve as a city to get there? So vision, the values, the goals, and I think our work was not only to capture all of the background you gave us, but really help to make sure that through each of the different hierarchies, begin to pivot ourselves to a place where ultimately we know this will be a document that will have clearly articulated, actionable strategies that are measurable, that will help us achieve the vision that we have for the city's physical development over the next 20 years. So know that was our work in working the feedback you provided to us. But that was definitely the lens we all worked under as we looked at these statements, because we need to get ourselves pivoted from the aspirational and maybe things that are certainly ways in which we want the community to grow and be. Our job was to help begin to position them to things where there could be some direction given or some clear indication about how physical development and good physical development will get us to the place that we want to be. So that's just some of the context, and hopefully that statement maybe gave a little bit of time for folks to read some of these and provide some additional feedback.
And I know we did get some comments because we posted this online, and we did get some comments on our website. I'm not sure if we got any on the vision statement, but Morgan, could you help me remember what we?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I believe
I put you on the
actually
spot.
Vicky had just put a comment on the website regarding the vision statement.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And so her comment, I think, was about beginning to show the relationship between these statements and the goal statements, that it was a little bit confusing how they tend to cover some of the same ground, that sort of thing. And we have done a matrix, Vicky, and I will. I've just recently shared it with staff, so I'll send that around to the committee. It does show the relationship between the goals, the intersections, if you will, between the goals and the vision statements, and all of the strategy team topics as well. So, I'll share that with everybody. It's a lot to take in a meeting like this, but I'm happy to send that around.
Since today that the theme of the today's meeting is putting people on the spot. No, it's not really.
Mm-hmm.
Vicky, can you quickly articulate what the feedback was?
I had two things. One was really minor, which is not a real big deal, but on the preservation part, I added protect to preserve places and celebrate history or something. I put preserve, protect, and celebrate. So that's pretty minor. Yeah, my question was, I read through these and all the goal statements, and maybe the matrix will help, but to me, it was confusing about what the difference was in terms of how aspirational or how action-oriented these were supposed to be, because they look so similar. And I guess my main question was, usually vision statements pretty short and a sort of unique description of what we're trying to become. And then most of these parts of the vision statement, the statements underneath, is kind of unusual, but I'm just trying to figure out how that relates, I guess, to the goals where there's so much overlap.
Yeah, the main difference, Vicki, is the vision rather is trying to describe a future. It's just trying to be descriptive about how we want our city to be, and the goals are telling us how to get there. So that's why there's so much overlap. We're trying to do. They just have two slightly different purposes. You know, the vision is just really more about describing an end state. If we successfully implement this plan, what does our city look like? And it guides the rest of the document. You know, it's sort of the starting point as well. But the goals begin to tell us how to do that, how to get there, and then of course, all the work we're doing on the strategy session will provide even more detail about how to get there as we move forward. So that's kind of the relationship. But we do have a spreadsheet that shows the relationship, the intersection, and the overlap between all of these. I'm happy to share, and hopefully that helps kind of clear up some of that.
Are there more statements with the goals that explain how we're going to do these?
There are.
Here?
There are. We have actually a whole paragraph that helps, that better explains each of those goals. And I was going to talk about that when we got to the goals. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but there is a more descriptive statement for each of those.
And Vicki, you raise a good point, and something that we need to be careful about, that if we're, to your point, it's making sure that we are being very, very clear about distinguishing between visions, values, and goals. And as some of our work in terms of putting goal statements together feels as though maybe it's sliding itself back up to be almost values or vision, we're not being consistent in direction. So I think that's something we need to look at. And I think even as we present it to all of you, in the more detail, I think we have to be really careful about that aspect.
I think it's fine to go back throughout the plan and keep tweaking this, because I think it will evolve based on a lot more of our input. But just in terms of, everybody argues about what's a goal and what's an objective and what's a strategy. And I know that's real confusing for people. So the more we can use it consistently however you want to, but to make it a little more clear between the difference. I think an average reader would read one and read the other and say, I don't get the difference. But if there's an extra paragraph of talking about how you're actually going to do that with, you know, bullet points of how much some of that means. I mean, these are going to be hard to accomplish, obviously. And so I don't know how far in depth we're going about how we're actually going to accomplish that. But one thing that's sometimes helpful, and it certainly isn't necessary here, is to think of the vision statement as something that we're always striving to attain. You know, that it's always our highest inspirational thing about what we're trying to do, become a connected city or become, you know, an example of whatever. And then the goals are more statements about how we will accomplish that, and that those are the things that get done. You check those off your list as you get done. But that's just a difference in theory about how to use the terms. And I won't bog the meeting down with that. It's fine. I think we need to just keep an eye on people's interpretation of the difference.
Absolutely. And again, I think the bottom line, I appreciate something from the common reader. The idea is that we don't want everybody to read this document to have to be a planning professional or know the difference. It needs to be as plain language and direct as possible. Others with feedback, thoughts, something that lifted off the page, or that really resonated or not. Okay. We'll keep going, but I think again we come back and we revisit where we need to.
Okay. And so the goals, as I've already gone over, the goal statements really support the vision. They talk about how we get there. They talk about what we need to do to achieve that. And as Vicky just said, I think rather nicely, it's the things we need to get done that we need to check off the list, so to speak. Whereas the vision is always something we're trying to attain. So I think that's maybe a good way to make that distinction as well. So these are our goal statements. They did not change much in the statement themselves, but we have added, and I'm sorry we haven't shared that with you. We will get that circulated right after this meeting. It felt like too much to put into a PowerPoint presentation, but there is a full paragraph that talks about more detail about each of these 13 goals. And we did incorporate a lot of the comments we got from you all into that kind of explanatory paragraph. So I think when we send that out, you will see that content. Hopefully you will see that content incorporated there. But those provide a lot more detail about what these goals mean, But we did get a couple of comments when we posted this up on the website. And Morgan, I'm going to put you on the spot again. I'm trying to remember what exactly people had mentioned so far. And please, if you have additional comments, raise your hand or pop those in the chat.
Sure. So it looks like one of the comments was in reference to the preserve and celebrate history and landmarks. Looking for some mention or discussion about reconciliation in education for that goal. And we had a comment that agreed with that. And let's see here. The celebration of our history must include reconciliation in education. There are difficult conversations to broach around some of the history. And I would invite Alicia and Nyala to expand on that if they would like to.
Sure, I'll talk about that. Yeah, I reading through that, I saw that the preserve and celebrate community character, history, landmarks. At first reading, I thought, oh, that's nice, and then I thought a little deeper on that because just conversations that we've had thinking even through the past year and even longer about some of the things that give us tension and how do we deal with that and how do we deal with the history behind some of those some of those sculptures or landmarks or whatever it is that's out in the world. And I know right now sometimes it's like, well, let's get rid of it, but where's the conversation about how do we create the education behind it, so it's not just an erasure of history, but an actual, I guess, coming to terms of it. But even more than just this is a thing that happened at this point in time, but think of reconciliation. So that's where the reconciliation part comes from, is thinking through like how do we move to that space of peace with each other and within ourselves, and how do we do that as a community, and just so thinking through that particular goal. I know that's pretty big kind of thing to insert in there, but I feel like that's something that we can't leave out. I think that's an extremely important piece that we need to name somewhere in here. That's it. That's all that the thought that I had on that.
Oh, Alicia, thank you. I appreciate the comment. Really related to one of the challenges we have throughout the course of this whole process is understanding how lots of these larger social issues represent themselves in physical form. And so I really appreciate your comment because you let us take a look at an issue that somebody feels socially based and equating it to a physical thing, and then saying what types of policies, procedures, recommendations should we have, in addressing histories associated with physical things and space we're calling landmarks. So it really helps to understand, and I appreciate your your explanation. It really helps us understand how we can begin to look at best practices as it relates to the matter from a physical planning standpoint.
Yeah, and I think, Alicia, we, in fact, I've already started adding that content, that sentence into the paragraph that supports that goal. I think that may be an appropriate place to describe that in more detail. If that sounds good to you all, I think we're going to make that change. We also had a comment, I believe, Morgan, about the fifth one over here on the left, address greater diversity. Is that correct? Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, that is correct. It is referring to the one that's about addressing greater diversity and creating opportunities. And the comment from Alicia as well was perhaps add inclusivity and community to that statement. And also, she was just looking for some more explanation on what we mean when we're saying address greater diversity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that maybe you were looking for a different way of wording that, Alicia.
Yeah, because I just thought, what does that mean when I read it? It's address greater diversity. I think I know, like, in general terms when people talk about it, what it means, but then I read it and I'm like, well, that could kind of mean anything, and create opportunity for what? Diversity, who, how, what? So it creates the rest of the other questions: who, how, what, why, all of those things. So I don't know, it was just kind of a blanket statement, and it, for me, just doesn't do anything. Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
not sorry.
Don't be sorry. We had a conversation about this because we had an opportunity to talk about it before the meeting, and thanks for your comment. And we thought maybe you could change. You could add the phrase "eliminate disparities" to the beginning of that goal, and instead of address, say embrace diversity. So it would say eliminate disparities, embrace diversity, and create opportunity. I think I see a hand up too, by the way.
Yeah, you do have a hand up.
Alexa, would you like to?
I like the creating opportunity part, and I agree with Alicia, and I agree on kind of saying embrace diversity, because I kind of agree with it. What does it mean? So, but I do like the embrace diversity, and I do like the creating opportunity part, but I think we need to address what we're creating opportunity for. Like Alicia said, I think it kind of short stops it there, because I kind of want to know, what opportunity are we creating? What types of opportunity are we creating?
And everyone, I think that's the point where, Gerald, we as a team probably need to share these goal statements. I think one of the challenges may be that in many ways, they are almost introductions, to your point, Gerald, to paragraphs that get much more specific about what they mean. So looking at them just as standalones is probably not helpful. And in many ways, looking at standalones could almost think we're actually moving ourselves back in terms of where we're at. So I think we need to get to all of you the details associated with these goal statements for you to take a look at them holistically. Because I think independently we'll start to wordsmith them and probably get them back to what the vision statements are like. But that, I know that's not the intent. So let us do that for you and get back and pull that all together and get it back to you and bring it to you one more time. Well,
Yeah,
just one more time. But let's do that.
And we've got
we will do
and we
that.
have a draft of that we're working on, and as soon as we get it reviewed and blessed here, I think we can send that out soon.
So we'll know that when we start our next meeting with you all, we'll start here. You don't need the precursor. We'll start here right at this point, right at the very issue about how is a goal statement different than the vision statement, and giving you a lot more the detail regarding the goal statements, so you can take a look at that and be comfortable that we are, again, kind of moving ourselves in that direction to things that are more actionable and strategic. So let's do that for everybody. That's
Okay.
good. Okay.
Yep.
If that's good, I think maybe that's our pivot point, and make our way into our equity conversation.
Yes. And let me bring that up and introduce. I guess I'll introduce the idea and then introduce Travis, who will be giving a presentation on this and then facilitating a conversation. But basically, we'd like to define equity, which is a broad term, but for what it means for the comprehensive plan and for what it means for each of our 4 strategy areas. And again, reminding everyone that we'd like to kind of limit that definition to what the comprehensive plan deals with, which is a physical and built environment. And with that, let me pull up Travis's presentation. And Travis, if you want to go ahead and
Hi, all.
say hi. Yeah.
Hi, it's nice to see you all. Some of you I haven't seen in a long time, and some of you I have not met before, and so it's really nice to be in your space with you today. When Bo is ready, and I refer to him as Bo because I've known Bo for a long time, and that's how I met him, is Bo. So when he's pulled up the presentation, which basically, to give you a heads up, when you are trying to talk about equity, often the word comes up, but sometimes we don't know specifically what we all mean when we say that. So the purpose of today's conversation is to try to get the bones of what the definition of equity might be for the playbook as we think about the built environment. And so a great way we think to do some of that is to build a common foundation that helps to define maybe the way equity has been talked about or is being worked through in the Kansas City Metro. So Bo, if you go to the next slide. What we're going to do is I'm going to outline for you just a few examples of what could be considered in that common foundation. Go to the next slide. So we have some examples of equity organizations, equity efforts in our metropolitan area. The first one is with the Mid-America Regional Council. Then we're going to go into the 2018 KC Race and Equity Initiative. We'll talk about KC Rising, and then we'll talk about advocacy groups. And heads up to Laura McDonald, More Squared is featured as one of the advocacy groups, or the one that we're going to highlight. I know there are lots of conversations that have been happening in the Kansas City Metro and in Kansas City about equity. The purpose of these examples is just to give you a sampling. So maybe some of the terms that are used might resonate with you, might inform what you would like to see in a definition. So again, all we're trying to do is establish a framework for this, or just a common foundation. So for Mark, in 2013, they had an equity profile done for the Kansas City region. You all know that Mark serves a broad area. It's 119 cities and I think it's 9 counties. But in their equity profile, there is a definition for equity. And it is ensuring full inclusion of the entire region's residents in the economic, social, and political life of the region, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, gender, neighborhood of residence, or other characteristic. And I see there is a comment. Is anyone having a problem with the slides not moving? I can see the first Mark slide right now with the definition of equity. Is everybody else seeing that? I see some head nodding.
Yeah, that's what I see, Travis as well.
Okay.
That might just be mine, Travis. I'm still on your first slide. It won't budge.
Well, and
That's
I
okay.
think, are you sure? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to do a certain amount of reading, so it will probably be okay. Okay.
And I'm still on the first slide too, so you're not alone.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Having technical issues.
That just changed. Okay.
Yeah, it works now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, let's try to go to the next slide. And just in case there are other glitches, like I said, I will do some reading and summarizing of what's on the screen. So for Mark, inside of their equity profile, they had what they called equity indicators. We like this because inside of a comprehensive plan, there are going to be different chapters or marks that you're going to want to hit. And so inside the regional equity profile, there are certain equity indicators. Those have to do with the demographics, economic vitality, readiness in terms of educational gaps that then inform our economic development opportunities, well-being, and inclusion. And then we also have in there an equity indicator called connectedness, which is about, neighborhoods and residents being connected to one another. A lot of what you see, and if you've ever seen the regional equity profile, there's a lot in there about communities of color, their value, again, education, how that informs our economy, and then other aspects like housing, affordable housing, and transportation. And then we touch health, but we touch it with healthy foods in communities of color. So that's what Mark has. And let's go to the next slide, Bo. So a few years ago, there was the Race and Equity Initiative. How many of y'all participate in some of those conversations? Give me a thumbs up if you participate in some of those, or did you hear about them? Okay. I think I see my colleague Stephanie in this picture, but they had some conversations, and the whole thing was to address the history and systems that have resulted in what we have perpetual inequities among race and culture. They used some data there, so their touch points had to do with poverty, education, employment, health, and crime. But once they'd gone through that analysis, on the next slide, what you'll see are where they hope to go with that, which had to do with normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing. So getting used to the conversations, and then creating training experiences and other resources that would address the biases that exist. And then there was a goal of having a planning document and a dashboard that would outline the direction and also mark progress towards achieving the goal and the vision. So that was a local initiative here in Kansas City. There's another organization, you all have heard of KC Rising. KC Rising describes itself as a community of communities. And it's all about the vision of regional prosperity for all, aligning and accelerating community effort for the greatest impact. And I think a lot of their work seems to be around the economics of things. So they're growing the economy, including everyone, but they also have, as of 2018, a steering committee that has created a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory committee to ensure that diverse backgrounds are folded into and included in their work. And so that's a really deliberate step. And that's the one way that I've seen, just looking at their website and that type of thing, how they are trying to incorporate equity. So it's something that's built in. But KC Rising has some pillars that they're trying to achieve and work towards. On the next slide, we can look at a couple of those pillars. So they have one for connectivity. This one seems to be about transportation and internet, and we know that the internet is a utility for people's success. Neighborhoods, healthy and safe, attainable housing is what they're talking about there in the neighborhoods. And then the enterprise component is really the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And again, their drive seems to be about the economy. Let's go to the next slide. A couple other pillars: industry, inclusion, and education. So it's attracting, growing, and retaining a globally competitive spirit in business. They've got an inclusion pillar in here. So you start to see those words again: participation when everyone has equitable opportunities to advance, something that they're looking at, and then education for all ages, so that we have equitable access. And then they talk about culture. I kind of like this picture because culture is multifaceted. And in Kansas City, one of the things that we're always selling is our barbecue. But we all know that culture is more layered than our barbecue here in Kansas City. So here's More Squared. We know that More Squared is a nonprofit, and they have equity in their name: Metro Organization for Racial and Economic Equity. They've got different organizations, and not organizations, but work teams, but it's all social justice. And they're working to change policy, grassroots initiative. It's really community organizing and very effective. Let's go to the next slide. Their issues have to do with criminal justice, and they have task forces that work on each of their issues. Education, we're talking about equitable, quality public education for all. Get into funding and governance. Their focus of healthcare is a little bit different than some of the others, in so much as you're talking about equitable, affordable, and accessible healthcare. Mark was talking about health in terms of food access. Casey Rising was talking about in terms of housing and neighborhood. So you're seeing there's different spins on what it means when you say health and you're talking about equity. Also, immigration rights or immigration is one of their equity focus areas. And they are one of several organizations that are congregation or faith-based. And that is our foundation. So really, I wanted to share that with you just to give you an idea of the way that equity has been talked about in our region. But then we really need to narrow down a bit what it means to talk about equity and define equity in Kansas City. Let's go to the next slide. I have 3 questions that I would really love to get some feedback from you all about. Your feedback is going to help us frame the equity statement for the KC Spirit Playbook. No, we're not going to have the completed statement here today, as you all can guess, but we can at least have a starting point. And then from there, as we go into our 4 strategy topic areas, we'll begin to look at equity with some of your feedback and then dig down deeper into our topic areas. But for today, just thinking broadly, I would really like to focus on the first question, which is how should we define equity for Kansas City's built environment? Is there anything that you heard so far that you think resonates and that we should include in how we define equity? Is there something else that comes to your mind? I know that you all are, I see some head nodding, and I see David was nodding his head. He might have a comment. And I know you guys are doing hands up, and I don't know if I can see all of that. So Morgan or Bo, can you see all the hands up if there are? You can also put things in the chat. I see that someone, I don't know who is this.
I don't see any hands right now.
David's commented.
I could note there is I was saying I think a lot about the word belonging, I think, in built environment, which is both, I think captures some of that pieces of saying, look, there's celebration of things that are beautiful and historic or not, but also making sure that that is a place where everyone feels that there is a sense of belonging, and also investing in places that already mean a lot but may have not received investment, and also understanding across the city what really matters. And a lot of that, I think, in a very place-based fashion, is supporting a lot of different voices and communities across the board and being able to shape their own environment and have more say over that, and sort of properly matching the citywide resources and expertise with the kind of pluralism of a variety of different communities across the board and what they want to see happen for them. And that those can be communities by race or identity, it could be communities by business community, it could be communities by geographic area. I think it's very interesting to see what Gladstone has done on its own as a city in terms of being able to build up their own downtown in their own place in a way that probably very few places that are subsets of Kansas City are able to do. And you sort of say, what does that look like to build that kind of belonging across the board?
So there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Belonging and investing and having a say to shape what your future is going to be. What else are you all thinking about how we should define equity in the built environment? So, we're talking about buildings and development and transportation networks and, the infrastructure that serves all of that. What else are you thinking? And you can drop it in the chat too if you're more comfortable doing that. Vicky has her hand up.
Sorry, I'm still way behind on the slides. I think when you're talking about the physical stuff that and the lack of investment in certain areas, which are all connected to other things, is that we recognize that we need to take care of what we've already built and already invested in. And if you count the number of miles of streets and underground sewers and water, et cetera, that are 150 years old, some of that's getting changed, but as we continue to build new in other parts of the city, the urban core is still struggling with lack of sidewalks and lack of basics and that kind of thing. So I think if we had somewhere, wherever it fits, a dedication and commitment to taking care of what we build, and that that's equitable within all 6 council districts.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not mean that that's the same stuff, you know, it costs different things in different places, but you know, if the Northland needs east-west connecting streets, okay, great. That costs something different than replacing an entire 100-year-old water system, you know, in several neighborhoods. So understanding what's in each neighborhood and trying to commit to what we've already got before we spend a lot of money on more new stuff that we can't maintain.
So it sounds like understanding the context where you're thinking of investing, recognizing what those needs are. There's probably going to be different. And then that means that the improvements might also be different.
Right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The Scott Wagner has a comment in the as well.
Oh, I just typed it in. I was going to let it go at that, but I think what I mentioned is the access to and variety of amenities that has its way not only in basic infrastructure, but also in the sorts of amenities people want to have. So access to stores and the ability to get to them quickly, good parks and good park systems, which could go all the way to things like swimming pools and those sorts of things. But the other thing, though, has to be related to transportation and the ability for people to be able to get to those sorts of amenities without necessarily having a car. We talk a lot about free access to busing here, as well as free streetcars and those sorts of things. But the reality is, unless you're by a line, it doesn't really matter. And so how does one have access to transit in a way that you can get to where you want to go? I will take the opportunity also just to mention and talk about Vicky's comments, only in respect to the fact that there's the old adage that one person's trash is another person's treasure. And depending on where you are at the city, what you need may not be fixing something that's old, but having access for something that's new that solves a problem, which depending on where you live, you may think that that's either the greatest idea in the world or the worst thing you've ever heard of. And so recognizing how people value those sorts of things is also important, I think, as we go through this process as well. Okay. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Vicki, is your hand back up, or is it still? And you're muted. So. Nothing? You're muted, Vicki.
Never mind.
Okay. Okay. If it comes back to you, let us know.
I see in the chat from Jordan Douglas. Folks not know Jordan. Jordan is a senior at Missouri State University, a planning senior that's actually doing his shadowing here with us for the month. So we've invited him into the meeting. And so his comment was about sustainable leisure amenities, parks, facilities, and green spaces. And he got 2 thumbs up. So the insight is resonating. I don't know whether Jordan or anybody who kind of put their thumbs up to that wants to add a little bit more.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in a little bit with what Scott Wagner said. I think our great challenge, and it's kind of an overlay of the equity issue, is the sustainability issue. I think for Kansas City, our tremendous challenge is the geographic footprint of the city, and the fact that the growth of this city, we have the south of the river that's a century ahead of north of the river. And that creates some disparity where we have all greenfield construction that's being pushed for economic development reasons in the Northland. Then south of the river, we're looking at urban redevelopment. 2 really different visions and 2 really different populations. And how we bring all that together to solve the equity thing is I think is going to be a great challenge of this group. Scott certainly pointed out transportation across the region means accessibility to options, to get to work, to leisure, etc. So if you're going to deal with the equity issue, I think transportation, access, the fact that we're all on Wi-Fi here tells us that we also need to deal with access to to cellular and Wi-Fi opportunities within the city, and understanding that of how we're going to remain connected. So it's a big agenda. I don't know how many solutions, but I wanted to chime in and support what Scott was saying.
Thank you.
I wanted.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that we should make sure that when we're thinking of inclusivity and equity and place, we're really thinking about abilities and disabilities as well. I think that's just really important, because we tend to make things for fully able-bodied people. And then, yeah, I give everybody a thumbs up for this dialogue. It's really good. But we have a lot of places in Kansas City that some folks, whether it's race or economics, don't feel encouraged to be at or welcome. And I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me in this discussion is not just accessibility, but that word belonging. I think it was Alexa that said.
In the chat, I think Vicki had put a comment in the chat, and it said on equity and transportation, plan for major changes like electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. So let me ask y'all some. Oh, does anyone else have another comment before I ask you something else? Go ahead, Vicki.
One of the issues that Scott and Steve were talking about has, a long history and a lot of issues in Kansas City between North and South. But when the focus plan was done, the urban core definition included a good portion of the Northland, especially just south of Vivian Road. Because people make assumptions that everything up north of the river is new and great and big, and other people make assumptions that everything east of Troost is terrible, and none of that is true. Kansas City is so big and has so many options and so many different things going on, so much history, that you really have to look at neighborhoods specifically before we jump to stereotypes in policy. And one way we did that before was to have the neighborhood assessment plans for all 300 neighborhoods. Travis, you worked on those. Yep. So did Bo and Kyle, so that the neighborhood could define what it was they thought they needed. And then by those categories, you could apply services like public works and planning and water, and all the other departments can deal with neighborhoods based on what they said they needed and what they thought they could do themselves and what they thought they could get a partner to help them with. But so there were like 4 categories, but it wasn't just north and south or east and west. A lot of people don't really get around much of Kansas City. They don't know the whole thing. And understanding those differences, which is like what Scott said, different things cost different amounts of money. So, equity just money-wise is not really a good answer. Equity need-wise, that people think they need themselves, that's important.
Very good. It makes me think about that map, because the neighborhood assessments, depending on how you classified yourself as conservation, stabilization, redevelopment, or developing, they're all a color, and it gets away from north and south because you can see where all the colors are for each neighborhood, right, and how you have common needs to another. So here's another, what I hear so far is that you like words like belonging, investing, giving people more to say. We like access, that's multifaceted. Dedication, commitment, value, sustainability, sustainable. You like that? And to be aware of stereotypes and think about what it means to be inclusive. So abilities and and disabilities. And then that belonging also speaks to welcoming. So here's another question for you all. When we are thinking about equity, and those are some of the characteristics that you shared. So another question, which is, what characteristics should equity have? For example, if you were thinking about livability, We know that livability is really where our buildings are. You might have a different set of characteristics for it if we were just talking about mobility. It might look a different way, and so on. Are there particular characteristics that you think equity should have? And as you're thinking about that, you could pick a topic area, or you could just speak in general. I'm trying not to pin you down too early.
Well, Travis, if I can, and just listening to the committee and conversation, a comment earlier about welcoming spaces, Laura mentioned welcoming spaces. I was looking at that really visually. What does that look like? And if I was to put it into physical form, and maybe I just went to a government building, for example, because lots of government buildings and structures were literally built architecturally to be somewhat imposing because they were looking to convey a sense of power and order. So, oh, I'm sorry, I lost Laura. The screen changed on me. But I think the idea about, so how do you design a space, a public space that feels welcoming? Is there the ability for people to be comfortable in that space by themselves or with groups of others? Is it a space where someone can physically be there to set themselves up in the place where they have the greatest level of comfort? Is it obviously those things to make sure it's welcoming because there are no barriers from anybody to being at that space? That, Laura, I hope you don't mind. I just took your word and example to kind of use it as an example about how it's the broader convex definition and rolling it over into that characteristic piece. That's how I see Travis asking us that question. Laura, hopefully you can thumbs up or thumbs down if I took it way too far. You can tell me.
No, I think that's exactly right. Like what came to mind in this question was a certain pastor who's a rather iconic clergy in town telling me how he still gets a little queasy sometimes when he goes to the plaza because he was run off by police when he was a teenager riding his bikes down there, with his friends. So that comes to mind, and other groups of people. The plaza always is something that stirs that up for people of a certain age and Black folks specifically in our city, right? But the word belonging was really special, more than welcoming to me, because it's a twofold, it's a two-way street. Like this city, I'm really clear, this is my city. And, I belong there, but the city belongs to me, right? And some people don't feel that way about our city. And I think we could drill down then to a specific place, whether it's the plaza or the Power and Light District or whatever that might be. And I don't know that I'm the best one to answer what a welcoming feeling is, because I'm a middle-aged white woman. I'm welcome wherever I show up. So I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that, but I think it goes to something like what Alicia was saying earlier, some kind of an acknowledgement of what has been in certain places, but I'm not sure I know that the right answer.
It's okay. I don't know that we have to have a right answer. We just need to explore the idea. And to that, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, we think we just need to share and build off of one another, honestly. That's
all it is. We don't have a definition yet. We're going to have this conversation to get in the vicinity of one. And then like many other things, it'll get revised as we go through. But okay, so in the chat, Jordan wrote universally appealing. In other words, spaces or creation that hold no true specification, family friendly and culturally acceptable. That could be a characteristic.
That's been something that's just been on my mental. My bad. I was just gonna chime in really quick.
Go ahead.
Just hearing you guys speak. And Laura, I heard you speak about your age and the age difference. You know what I'm saying? So it may be hard to, you know what I'm saying, to relate to where, you know what I'm saying, you being a, you know what I'm saying, middle-aged, Caucasian woman, it may be hard for you to relate to a young African American or something. And that's kind of where people don't know when to, I guess, say that it's okay for both. You know what I'm saying? Like for the issues with that you just shared with your friend that had experienced issues at the plaza. Well, the plaza kind of they're not. It's not like it's not welcoming. So like we make things comfortable. We make things comfortable for one specific person or one specific race, when in reality, like that's not the most beneficial thing if you are really trying to draw. You know what I'm saying? If we're trying to bring the city together, or you know, things of such, like, so that's just all that means, to elaborate on it. Like it says what it says. But yeah, culturally acceptable, family friendly, it can all be one, you know. It just has to come to an understanding. People got to be comfortable with each other.
Mhm. That's really good. I'm getting a little bit of a picture with you all. What other characteristics do you think equity should have? Again, that we're talking about the built environment. You mentioned design before in Jeff's example, but Laura and Jordan are also talking about the feeling of those spaces. What's that like? What other characteristics come to mind? And I see they're getting some thumbs up in the chat. Miss MBT has, let's see, the factor of economics come into play when considering location and to whether it's appealing or welcoming to all. Miss MBT, do you want to elaborate on that a bit? I can sort of hear you.
My comment is with respect to talking about places like the plaza or anywhere else that are supposedly open to everybody. Mm-hmm. But if the economics of the area are only geared towards middle class or upper class folks, then it doesn't become welcoming, because to even be able to go into the stores, you have to have a certain amount of income. So I don't necessarily think it's only about race. It's also about the economic background of people and whether or not they even feel comfortable in the space.
Mm-hmm. So other factors, definitely. Go ahead, Jeff. You look like you're.
All right, if I can expand, working back in East New York, and we were talking about what we were hoping our downtown could be for a city. And it was the idea that you could spend a day and you could be in downtown and spend the entire day and have the opportunity to only spend $1 and really have a great day, or spend $1,000 and really have a great day in the same space at the same time. The single dollar is as valuable as the $1,000. But that was really one of the goals or the idea, a space where I can go in and spend nothing and spend significant time around others, or economics and money and dollars and revenue generated is important. I want somebody to spend $1,000 and I wanted them to spend it with us as opposed to on the other side of the municipal line or the state line. So economics very much creating, and that gets to mix of uses and environment and what we'll even call public spaces where everybody should be able to spend and stay as long as they want, and semi-public spaces and private spaces, how that all blends together. So there is a way to look at the economics. So I think there's very much a relationship there from the physical development of things and how things are structured.
I'm going to chime in real quick. So I know we're talking about spaces like those entertainment spaces, those spaces where you might have businesses, economic development, and those kinds of things, which I think is great. I think those are wonderful. And I have a little bit different kind of experience too, because I'm not originally from Kansas City. I've been here 20 years now, so it's home now. But I knew none of the history and none of that any stuff. So I walked in like I own the place. And so it's just, who cares, whatever, right? Although there's all this, rich history and all those other things. But as I've learned different things, though, I think one of the things to me, as I look at the built environment, the things around us, is I think about, and I know this gets people in trouble, is the streetscaping, right? That's kind of a big deal. because it changes, or it seemingly changes in different parts of town, and there's this perception that comes that the, depending on, the wealth of the community, that's the better it's going to be. So, like the example, is like, you roll down Roy Parkway, you're going to get the beautiful fountain, you're going to get all that. But if you roll down the other side of Meyer, like you're going over to Research, you kind of never know what you're going to get on certain days with the way the boulevard shakes out, down that way, or on the Paseo, or that kind of thing. Although, the city takes good care of the parks and boulevard, but sometimes we still have those spots that just, for whatever reason, when we start talking about connectedness and belonging, I think those things that could connect the city have disconnected because they have not been consistent. And I know that, styles and things like that change with, and they should, because they change with the architecture and shape of the neighborhoods and things like that. But I think there are still certain elements that could be consistent across the city in terms of quality, the quality of the work that is kept up, the quality of the maintenance. And so those are the things that I think would show equity in our city.
Miss Mbidi, you've got your hand up.
And so what Alicia is basically describing is the tension between how do we keep the city moving forward and how do we address all of the inequities in the poor parts of the city at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tremendous amount of work because it's going to take tremendous dollars to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's definitely, I mean, in Kansas City, but other cities that we have all been to other cities in theory, right? We can definitely see where you start to feel disconnected. And one of the things that you see as a visitor is what's missing from an infrastructure or streetscape standpoint. That's one of the first things that you see, whether you're driving on the highway or if you get onto the local streets. You can tell where there has been investment and where there's not. Jeff, you look like you're going to say something.
I was, and I appreciate really pointing out the boulevard and parkway system. Like Alicia, I'm not originally from here as well. And I was impressed with the system just because of its scope. In many ways, it touches all the city. It's something that's 100+ years old that we're still growing. So it's not like we don't have the potential, we don't already have a tool in place that we're taking everywhere that really is of high concept and quality and enduring. A system designed 130 years ago still makes sense today. We're building more of it. If the letdown is that we're judging or making investment based upon where that road is going, that truly is the letdown. But we have a tool that's unique to us, that is that vibrant element, something that I think only really Kansas City has to the degree that no other city has it to this degree. So I really just appreciate that being highlighted, and understanding how we take something that is citywide, and that's the piece here. I know we're talking about different neighborhoods in context, but you've identified an element that is citywide. There's a boulevard and parkway everywhere across this city. So it's not like it doesn't exist. It's there. How do we look at it equitably, uniformly, of the highest quality everywhere, so that knowing nothing to the city and driving and seeing, and you picked out really good examples, because Meyer Boulevard and Ward Parkway have really the same bones when you look at it. Fountains, medians, other kinds of things. It really has the same bones. So if the only thing we're looking at is somebody being able to judge, that grass doesn't look quite as right, or those light fixtures don't seem as new as the others, that's a self-inflicted wound on something that is inherently unifying. Sorry, I may be over participating, forgive me, but I'm gonna pivot back to you all. This is exactly the kind of conversation we want to have and need to have. So at that point, I literally mute, and please have others chime in.
Let me ask y'all one other question. I'm really aware that we have 12 minutes, but go ahead, Laura.
I just wanted to mention, like, there's this whole discussion that's really interesting right now about where we're going to locate housing for homeless folks, right? And I don't mean to like rip a Band-Aid off if this is really a personal issue for you, but as somebody who's worked with people who are homeless for a big chunk of my career, I'm finding it really fascinating, right? And if you just think about those little pods or houses or shelters or whatever you want to call them, and just mentally locate them all over the city and think about what the reaction would be if they're out my door, which is Berry Road, versus if they're on Ward Parkway, versus if they're on, 9th and Paseo, right? And just like think about it. I think that creates quite an idea about equity and what's equitable. And, there's a really strong NIMBY situation in our city. And we're not talking really about resources and things like that in this discussion per se, but I think that it should trigger some thoughts about equity when we think about that.
Mhm.
And where they would never consider locating those. It's almost like laughable to think they'd be outside on Berry Road by the Hy-Vee.
Mhm.
They won't be. But yeah, there's a lot going on with income equity, and I really just want to echo, I loved that comment that Jeff made about the dollar versus $1,000. I think that that really spoke to the poor little girl in me.
I have another question for you all, but I also see Vicky's echoing, giving thumbs up to Jeff's comment. It's a great example of focusing on design and physicality. It's not the only thing that areas need, and how many other factors affect the area, even though the physical environment has always been there, like parks and boulevards. And to Laura's point, right now people are homeless and they're housing in the parkway system, and everybody can see that, versus before they couldn't see that. And so it's becoming to the forefront. Let me ask you another question with the few minutes that we have left. When you think about the whole conversation that we've had today, how do you know equity in Kansas City when you see it? Or how do you want to say, hey, that's equity in Kansas City when you see it? Is it about your experience when you're shopping and your dollar and how many, and it doesn't matter how many you have and you still enjoy yourself? Is it some things that you see economically or you don't see, you don't have to worry about? How do you know equity when you see it? How do you want to know it? I know it's a tough question because it can be soft, but it can also be a physical thing too.
Well,
go ahead, Scott.
I don't think you should ask me, because I think the ones who feel they don't have it are the best to be able to answer that question. And I think by any standard, one would say, I have no idea how to answer that. I know Laura would tell me that, because she's not afraid to tell me that. And then I'd tell her, go look out Berry Road and have a nice day. But seriously, I think that is a very difficult question.
Y'all raised my rent in Midtown. That's why I moved up here. That's all I'm saying. All y'all did it, not just you.
I always vote no.
Oh. Well, Miss Mbidi has her hand up. Do you want to go ahead and unmute?
I would answer that as being when I can do anything that I want to in my neighborhood, go to the movies, go to a sit-down restaurant, walk down the street, go to a park to see my son play or daughter play a sport. Anything that I can do in my neighborhood that I could do anywhere else across the city.
Okay.
That I don't have to move out of my neighborhood physically to do any of the things that I want to do on a normal day-to-day basis. To me, that would be equity.
Yeah. It's really robust, really good. See head nodding to that. Kyle's got a hand up, and someone else that I can't see.
Teresa, I'll yield to whoever else is on there. I was just going to explain how staff is going to try to use this information. So,
I think it's still Miss Mbidi's hand.
This
Okay.
may be the time I ask for someone who we've not heard from today. And I'm not going to call you by name. I'm not going to just any thoughts and impressions. Now, Teresa has asked one question, but through all of this, something that's kind of struck you through this conversation on equity that either you didn't expect or you feel it's just that maybe is a little bit missing as it relates to your purpose working with this group. Hopefully that wasn't too much pressure. Sorry for folks. I just, again, this is, we appreciate this opportunity and we'll continue to do this through process. I thank Travis for helping facilitate, but we'll continue to do this. But things like that, there are no right and wrong answers here. And let me tell you that I can't tell you how many conversations I've been a part of over the last year talking about strategic planning for anything where the conversation starts as it started here today. How do you see equity and how do you see equity applied to the work of the group you're participating in? So it's huge, and I think we're all going to. If there was a playbook or a textbook or a checklist, we would not have had it from you. We would have shared it, but clearly there is not. These are highly complex issues, but the way we work through it is just by sharing personal experience, insights, or for us, physical reference to what feels and is equitable from your perspective.
And I think in the chat, going back to the question about how do you know it when you see it, Laura has echoed, I think, and adding on to Miss Mbedi's comment, which is that I can do this in my neighborhood, I can enjoy my neighborhood, I don't have to go across town. Some of us, including myself, who worked on the affirmatively furthering fair housing effort and got to talk to people across the region, and that whole, I want to be in my neighborhood, I want to live there, and enjoy my neighborhood and not have to leave it to go somewhere else to enjoy something and then come back home. We hear that a lot. And so that was also resonating there. And so she's added that in the comment. We want to live where we live, but we want other folks to be able to access it, be able to have access to transit. They can enjoy those same spaces.
Bobby put a comment, and I agree. And it was a question about the 15-20-minute city idea. And Bobby, you may want to expand upon it a bit.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a second or third iteration of something that I kind of trace back to Spain. Essentially, you have the ability to get to whatever you need to within 15 or 20 minutes. So that includes work, right? So it basically breaks up your entire city into sort of like self-sustaining neighborhoods. So you should be able to walk or bus or bike or drive to a grocery store or entertainment or something within your area, but you should also be able to get like around the city within 15 or 20 minutes. So it kind of speaks to like getting what you need near your house, but also being able to move quickly throughout the city easily. And I was trying to analyze this for where I live. I live in Volker, and I think it's as close to a 15-minute city as I could possibly imagine. Yeah, if that's a component of whatever how we're viewing equity, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
We have 3 minutes left. I want to, Kyle's got his hand up. I know you need time to close. I just want to say thank you so much for answering questions today and having such a really thoughtful conversation about what equity could mean for the playbook. And I know Kyle's going to talk about how we're going to use that. So Kyle, I yield to you.
Thank you, Travis. I'm smiling because you used my almost exact words there. So I'm just going to repeat them. I want to thank you, Travis, for helping us walk through this process. And I want to thank everybody, honestly, for the thoughtful conversations. The challenge we have as staff is asking you guys questions and finding a way to pull that back into what we're trying to accomplish. the equity conversation is one of those that could spill over many, many different directions. And what we have to do as staff from this point is take what we've heard and find ways to put that into plan recommendations that help us make a plan that we can actually implement and use going forward. That's what our task with the Empowerment Committee is going forward, and that's city staff's task as well as we move forward. So once again, thank you very much, Travis, for helping us get this far. Everybody else, we appreciate your comments. I'm going to hand it over to Gerald and Morgan real quick to kind of let you know what the next steps are. But that's where we're trying to go. We greatly appreciate it. Great job, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, and I'll be quick because we got less than a minute left here. Thank you again, everyone. Visibility and mobility meetings, we'll send you those calendar invitations. We encourage you all to attend and participate in those. But at our next Empowerment Committee meeting, we haven't set a date yet. We will have those two groups coming to this committee to report back on the conversations they've been having and get your reaction about equity, about consistency with the goals and vision and things of that nature. And we'll continue this equity conversation as well. And I think that we may have filled our agenda already, but we'd like to also try to have at some point a conversation about implementability as well. But that's where we're headed for now. Stay tuned for the next meeting date and time, TBD, and look for those invitations to the strategy sessions in your email inboxes. And thank you, everybody.
And Gerald, I want to thank our entire team here. And Travis is a part of the team. Once you're a city planning development staff member, you always retain that. That would be you too, Vicky. So you're always part of the team. We appreciate that. Know that, from my perspective, this was never going to be a plan where equity was sitting off in a corner of a plan in a chapter. This is the entirety of the plan. This is foundational for this plan. We knew this even before all of the life circumstances over the last year plus has let us know this is front and center. This is front and center. It is. I will always welcome and be grateful for each and every one of your thoughts on this topic. No rights, no wrongs, but it has to be there. The only wrong is if something isn't considered, is the only wrong as it relates to this conversation. So please, 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 something inspires you, hopefully not in the middle of the night, but maybe the first thing when you get up or as you go in bed, jot a note down, send it to us. Through this conversation, it has propelled us so far in being able to think about how to actionalize all the ways in which this needs to be a wholly equitable community. And everything from calling and addressing inequities to how do we make sure we don't we grow and inadvertently create inequity. We need you all for this work. Thank you. Thank you all for the time, consideration, the thoughts. We'll keep having the conversation. And if you don't feel like having the conversation enough, please don't be shy. Let us know. This is the continuum. This is the thread for all of us. So thank you all very, very much for the time and the attention and sharing. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Jeff, thank you.
Thank you.